Yeah, so my name is Robyn Erbesfield Raboutou. I'm a world champion, World Cup champion, been a competitive climber for many, many, many years, and have about 30 years of coaching experience, mostly with youth, but of course also with adults. And I would say some of my biggest claims to fame are ABC Kids Climbing, creating this youth program that's quite famous in the world now, as well as Team ABC, along with my amazing staff. And then, of course, the passion that my children share, both Sean and Brooke Raboutou are quite well known in the climbing world and just have an immense passion for climbing. And to me, that's like amazing as well, that we've been able to share that as a family. And my husband's a climber as well. So that's who I am.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys all climb so strong and keep positive energy. Like, that's one of the coolest things about everyone is, I mean, all of you just have so much, kind of positive energy surrounding you, like in the whole family. And you're training hard now, like you're climbing, harder or as hard as you ever have.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I do think the spirit of the family is nice, and that's just a blessing. There's nothing that I've done particular to have that be sort of the spirit. But both of my kids are very passionate by climbing. Just naturally, it's what they love to do. They love to travel. They love to compete. They love to climb outside. They love to climb hard, train hard. I don't know how I got so lucky that that's just what they like. If they didn't like that, then that would be my thing and not their thing, but it is their thing. And they share that with so many other people, in the world that have that same passion. So it breeds for sure. It's contagious, I would say. And I think that that's a lot of why I have continued to train hard and to be strong, because it is in our blood. And having, knowing that Sean and Brooke are passionate by that, and that, we invite each other to climb together, certainly keeps me going. Obviously, they motivate me, as do all of these young climbers, whether they're Team ABC athletes or just other friends of mine that have maintained their own athletic ability in similar ways. Yeah, I like to keep my own level as strong as I can without it being, taking over my entire life. So I work also, obviously.
Yeah, you have to balance the two.
Right. Finding that balance is really important.
So I guess in your own climbing, if maybe we'll start with warming up, is there anything, that you do? Is there any routine, any habit, any pattern that you personally do when you're going to warm up for climbing?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I've learned throughout my years is how important warming up is, and making sure that not just that my body is warm, so maybe like a short run or jumping jacks or something of that level, just get my heart rate up for the first 10 minutes.
Just to get blood flowing.
Right, get that blood flowing, and most importantly, the fingers. And so for me personally, at my age, I definitely use a tension block to just to solicit my fingers before I start. Sometimes I'll do a set of repeaters, or I might even do a little bit of arcing. So just like all holds on the wall, 60% of my max, and just general movement, kind of like that first 10 minutes of a cardio workout. I might also do that on the wall. So those are like the three things that I focus on, is just the general overall body. Sorry, my puppy wants treats.
Now you can bring your puppy on too.
Yeah, well, if she barks too much, I'll have to tend to her, but hopefully not. But yeah, so the overall getting the body just warm and the blood flowing, and then soliciting the fingers, really, really important. A little bit of mobility, so working with some elastic, making sure that stretching the arms, lots of shoulder stuff. But I really feel like I can get my warm up in about 20 minutes. I'm usually ready to fire in about 20 or 30 minutes with a good routine.
And have you felt like have you ever had the period like maybe you over warm up where you just do too much and you feel 100%. Like a drop in your performance?
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people over warm up. I know that I used to over warm up even back in the day when I was training like hard for competitions. And I mean, it was relative to my fitness level. And I think that if I was, if it was a competition and I was used to 3 hours of training and all I had to do was 4 boulder problems, it was hard to really mess with that. But what we've learned now is that we do want to save ourselves for the peak performance. And there is a fine line. And I think a lot of athletes figure that out pretty quickly, but not without a little trial and error, because you can There's just a lot of things that happen in your warm-up. It can be that you go into your warm-up too fast, and that can spoil your end result. It might be that you're rallying with friends and they're maybe at a different place in their warm-up than you are. So maybe they got there 15, 20 minutes before you, and they're on harder boulders, and you're like, you dive in, oh yeah, that boulder looks cool, I want to try it. Yeah, and you kind of catch up. Those are errors, right? But I think that most great athletes, or at least coaches that are following athletes, can help the athlete sort of find that sweet spot. And that's ideally you want to find what's right for you. So when I say 20 minutes is about right for me, I can usually, after about 20, maybe 30 minutes, get into my sort of level of climbing without any risk of injury. And I know that the kids, on a warm day, even for myself on a warmer day, that might go faster. On a cold day, I might need a little more time. If I'm third day on and my fingers are feeling like a little rough, I might be like, oh, I need a little more time. I need like hang on my fingers a little bit more in a really like protected and programmed way, rather than just getting into a boulder problem that could eventually be, detrimental to my fingers. So I think knowing your body and being willing to adapt in your warm-up is really important. And that's just like a good athlete or a good coach that's sort of managing the athletes.
Yeah. And then with the tension block that you mentioned, if you're in like the outdoor environment, do you just like sling it around your feet? Do you find a tree branch? Like, do you have any tricks?
Yeah. And I've got a pretty good trick for that. I find a tree branch that's not very big. And so it moves, and it can be a lot like a pulley or a weight system.
Interesting.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So it gives a little bit of like a give back.
Yeah. It basically is like a swaying tree, right? You pull it and it goes back, and you pull it and it goes back. And so it's like a pulley system.
Oh, really. That is a good.
It was lucky that I found it, but I was like,
I was going to say, did you just figure that out by accident?
It was by accident. Yeah. I just put it on a small tree branch, and I was like, wow, this is perfect. Works really, really well. Highly recommend it. Yeah.
So that's warming up. Is there anything that you do differently with the teams that you coach warming up than you do yourself? Because obviously, for example, for me, I prescribe exercises to some people that I may not do myself, or, there's some disconnect because everyone's an individual, and in team environments, things are different. But yeah, how does that work for teams?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the team is a group, right? And you're generally addressing the group and hopefully encouraging them to meet their own needs. But you are, just like at school, you're putting up an assignment up on the board, and you're hoping that everyone's going to do the same warm up, right? But obviously what's right for you at the same time. Someone has an injury, we'll talk on the side about why don't you take it easy on, and ease into this, and maybe don't go up to, V5, maybe stay at V4 for the next 30 minutes, maybe go over to the tread wall, get your heart rate up. Their needs might be different. But overall, what we try to do really is just have diversity. So perhaps it's like, do, 2-3 minute arcs, and then move into like a V1 to V5 over a 15-minute period, right? It's just like we change it up a lot. Maybe it's a game where it's like V points, so they come in and have their independence, but they're trying to get as many V points as they can up, no more than V5s, and we might calculate that on the board and like put a bucket of how many V5s, Vs we're getting, right? V points we're getting, and we just try to keep the kids stimulated. Really, the younger the kid, the more the games. The older the kid, like our 18, 19-year-old elite team, I mean, they've got their competition warm-ups and a lot of things that we'll play with. And it's much more individual for them.
So that makes sense. So you're really just it's the same kind of philosophy. You're trying to slowly load and increase, but you're trying to keep them engaged.
Yeah. And keep it fun, and have variety, especially for the groups. Like if we gave them the same warm-up every time, I mean, we do encourage them as we get closer to the competition to define their warm-up. But that's different than, at the beginning of the season, like dictating a warm up and then having them do the same thing every single time until the competition. So we explore throughout the season until we get close to the bigger championship events. And then we hope that we expect that they'd have a defined warm up. And so when we talk about warm up, there's, many different levels of warm up. The first thing that almost every ABC athlete does is kind of the ABC We have a bit of a trademark or a brand for our warm up, which is kind of a head to toe just movement. You're basically stationary in one place. And that's like, shoulders and here and, here, and then the hips and hip flexors.
Just getting everything in kind of each direction.
And that's just stationary, right? And then they go on to the field of play where they're doing more like, V1 to V4, a little, a few sessions of arcing for 2 to 3 minutes at a time. Up, down, ups, or another one, just different exercises that they know that are going to warm them up before they get into the meat and potatoes of their workout.
And then as they get closer to like their own individual kind of pre-comp routine, they'll basically tailor that to
right. And it'll be written on the word, continue to define your competition warm up. So it's like, we don't really even need to know what that is for you, but we're watching, we know, and it's really at that point, they need to be able to show that they have that in place, because as we get to a championship event, we're not testing anymore. We're going with what works.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So then for yourself, we talked about warm up. What about supplemental exercises? Like obviously you're training for climbing, you're doing things that, that make you stronger for climbing. Personally, is there anything that you do that
like kind of working weaknesses or maintaining strengths or?
Yeah, I think, things that maybe you found over the years that maybe supplement anything outside of actual climbing itself. Okay. And this could be performance training.
I do quite a bit. Yeah, I do quite a bit of that. And I go through periods and phases where I do different things, but I try to maintain a 1 or 2 day a week. We're speaking of me personally, and it's often same for the teams as well, or at least the older kids. I try to maintain a 1 or 2 days a week of strength training. So like hangboarding, particularly, where maybe I'll do repeaters on one of the days, and then 3 to 4 days later, when I do the next session, maybe it's more strength, like max hangs.
So you are varying the type of stimuli.
A lot of variety in there, exactly. I might do max pull-ups as well. I might do some one-arm practice. I definitely do some pinch pulls. So kind of like with the tension where, you have the edge.
Yeah, and you're basically
I have some pinches that DDA built. So we do some pinch pulls, both narrow and wide. I do some.
Is that just for pinch strength, or do you find that translates outside of that to like all different types of grips?
That's a really good question. I know for me, I feel like pinches are a weak link. So the more I, sort of don't let that go. If I just don't work on my pinch strength, and then I don't feel good on pinches, I can only blame myself, right? So I try 1 day a week to have a pinch routine in place through strength training, where I'm like, okay, at least I'm checking that box that I'm working on my pinch strength. And then if I'm still having trouble, I can accept that a lot better than if I'm like, well,
you're not doing it.
I haven't been working my pinch strength. So what could I expect, right?
Yeah. So, all right. So you were saying, okay, you're doing pinch block training. Additionally,
right.
what
else?
I
just kind of really, I have 2 pretty basic routines. They almost always start with repeaters. Just like sometimes I'll do repeaters, almost always 2 hands to start with. And I'll like have my feet like on the ground. So like not 100% of my weight. And I'll just do like a 7 second, 3 seconds, 7 second on, 3 seconds off, or 10 seconds on, 5 seconds off. I'll run that for like 8 times, might even do that twice. And then I'm warm, like I'm ready to go into like a much more try hard. And I might do weighted hangs. I might pull out my tension and do like pulls with weights. So like where I'm actually like closed, and then I'll do a set of open and a set of closed and a set of open. And then I vary that with like large pinches, small pinches. And with the pinches, I tend to do really just like a holding weight rather than pulling, because it's really hard to keep the grip unless
it like changes as you move it.
Well, and unless it's light, it's like it just keeps me, So I just try to vice grip it, and that's just like that holding time. So it's a lot like a repeater, but it's just not as long and not as many reps.
Yeah, and you're saying because basically when you pull it, it's just going to slip out of your hand.
If I put enough weight on to make it like
meaningful,
or just like meaningful, even, it's very likely that after 1 or 2 pulls, it's starting to slip. So I find that it's better to just kind of pull, get into an engaged position, hold, and then release and repeat. And I just we'll do that instead of like regular, pull downs like I do. When I have like an open or a closed hand crimp, I can pull
you could just
like
move and
weightlifting.
pull through it.
Yeah, it's like if I had a bar, you can move that around with a lot more control.
Yeah, and I think I'd seen you at some stage do something. Didn't you rig some pulleys somewhere?
Yeah.
Did you ever? Yeah. So did you rig some pulleys and then you had the weight on there and you were?
Yeah. I use that on a regular basis at home. Yeah.
And that's nice because that's a continuous load, versus like a resistance band that changes.
And you can track it. Like I know if I'm pulling 45 pounds, that I'll start, with like 30 pounds and then go 35 and then 37.5 and just progress up to it. And then have expectations that maybe I also try, 50 pounds when I'm at my, like a pyramid, when I'm at the highest level of progression.
So now what about climbing movement? Because that's something that like completely fascinates me. I know you've been studying it nonstop and you watch climbers move all the time and with it on yourself. Yeah. Are there any things, obviously we can't say that if someone moves a certain way repetitively, that would lead to injury. We can't draw that conclusion, but we can likely draw the conclusion if there are common errors or techniques that you notice in climbers that prevent them from,
Right. Yeah. Injury prevention is a great thing to talk about. And I feel like for myself, if I speak about myself personally and, at my age and my interest in climbing, one of the areas that I notice I've had sort of some red flags on. And so again, I'm like, okay, well, if this is happening, you need to do something about it or it's going to be worse. And that is hamstrings. So heel hooks, right? Yeah. So I actually do like kind of like a routine of like repeaters, but for heel hooks.
Really? How do you set that up? What do you do?
I'll explain it to you. It's quite easy actually to set it up. It's kind of like a system board-ish. Mm-hmm. So like the same on the right as on the left. And I'll explain that. But my theory with that is that if I go to a boulder problem, for example, and it's like, left heel intense from the beginning, like it's, as soon as I get into it, like a traverse, it's like left heel, move, left, replace the left heel, move. And like, no wonder my hamstring is about to explode because I'm like 5 heel hooks in, on hard boulders. Right. And if I'm not heel hooking any other day of the week, I'm basically going from 0 to 100.
Yeah. It's out of the norm. Right?
It'd be like if I decided my fingers would just always be strong, but I didn't do anything other than go try really hard, like, of course, my fingers are going to break. So I realized pretty early on that I needed to train my lower body in repetition on specific movements, and heel hooks is one. So basically what I do is I have just a really good hold and then a really good hold for the heel. And so it's like basically 3 points, like a left foot, a heel hook, and you pull into the heel. So the left foot goes, you pull just like a heel hook, you pull in, move up, come back down.
And are you on like a vertical or overhung, or doesn't matter?
Like 20 degrees is fine. Okay. It really doesn't matter. It could be vertical. It could be overhanging. You just have to have the holds big enough, or small enough.
And you have that set up symmetrically. So you basically have one hold in the middle.
Like a system board. So it's left foot, right, or left foot, right foot. Exactly. Yeah. And then I just do like kind of like repeaters where I'll repeat it several times on both sides and rest and then repeat again. And you can also do like finicky heel hooks. So you can do heel hooks that are a little harder to hold. You can do much bigger ones, like really, kind of like if you hung on a 20 millimeter edge or you hung on an 8 millimeter edge.
Yeah, you're doing the same, but for your heels.
Yeah, but for your heels. Yeah. So that's something that I really enjoy doing, and I practice on a regular basis.
And that's actually pretty cool because I haven't heard that. That's common. That's a very common acute injury that happens without warming up properly or without habituating and loading and getting
Well, if you think about it, it's something that we really don't do until we have to do it. It'd exactly. Be like if you came to me and I was in your shoes and you said, God, I've got this V11 that I try all the time and it's like really small cramps, blah, 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 blah. And I'd say, well, what do you do when you're not on that boulder? And you're like, oh, I just work. Like, how do you expect to not break your fingers if you don't maintain some kind of like mobility or strength training along the way to solicit those fingers before you have to put them at 100? It's like I said, 0 to 100. You can't be at 0. You really have to train all of those things.
Yeah, that would be like me just saying, all I do is crack climb and then expect myself, which is kind of true, but then expect myself. I
do the same thing for lock-offs. Like if I think my lock-off is down and not like where I want it to be, and particularly on a climb, I'm like, okay, I know what I need to do. And I just take an edge and I like pull it down, reach as high as I can, repeat, and I just simulate that.
Yeah. And you
It's
just
a lot
kind of
like-
and you just get comfortable to that load in those positions. Are there any movements, if we're looking at the elite level climbers and you kind of take your group and look at the higher level, are there any things that you notice that differentiate the highest level or higher level climbers from more of the maybe moderate level, not novice, but kind of moderate level, as far as their movement on the rock wall, or any patterns that you notice that differentiate?
Well, I mean, I'm a firm believer that everyone can get good at something, right? So I wouldn't say that if you don't have good movement that you won't get good movement, but by all means, there are, sort of those fast twitch climbers that they're like, you watch them on the wall and they're just like, they have it. Like my son is one. He's just amazing to watch. It's just like, if I watch him on a skateboard, he's good. If I watch him playing with my dog, like he's just fast. He's got like really good coordination. And I think it shows in his climbing. Right. Then put that together with really good footwork and, all those things. And you've got
the whole package.
The whole package. Right. And so, it's not unusual to break those steps down like we do that in practice for the kids, where we break down those different elements. We can work it even in a like weightlifting environment where it's like, step ups or run a jumps across the wall, or compression movements where we're having to move maybe two hands at once to improve the coordination. So, I mean, there's no doubt that some people have that and others don't, but everyone can get there if they recognize that's what they want. And they recognize that as like maybe a weakness, or if it's a strength, chances are, they need to develop something else. Maybe it's standing and smearing on their feet, in a different way.
Yeah. And what's your favorite, if you were to look at all the kind of drills or things that you would use, let's say in practice, do you have like a one favorite that you use or utilize with the teams that's like kind of your go-to, if that you enjoy kind of pulling out?
Right. I mean, we do play like games like the dino game, which is just a favorite of mine and a favorite for the kids, where they make up dinos with a person. Like you and I would make up like 3 dinos, and then 2 other people would make up 3 dinos and 2 other people, and then we share. And it's like a dino comp. So like you and I we would demonstrate our dinos, and then everyone else would get the chance to do it. They only get one try. They only get one try, but they'd have one try to basically get a point. And then we go to the next boulder. And so what's nice about that is you have, the time that you spend creating the dinos with your partner, and then you get to get exposed or be exposed to all the other dinos within your group. And it's a mini competition because each group gets a point if they do the dino of the others, including their own.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like fun. That's
one of my favorites. Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's like Hawaiian shirt Fridays or something. That would be like the equivalent of.
Right.
Anything in closing, as far as with injuries, if you were to have any advice? I mean, obviously you've been climbing strong have you had any like any serious injuries yourself?
I've been very fortunate that I have not had any injuries. And I really take that back to my, days when I started climbing. I started traditional climbing, where I couldn't really climb any harder than my ability to get the rope up myself. So I rarely had the opportunity to clip a bolt and then, try the next section, right? Yeah. If I couldn't hang in there and like put a piece of gear in, which develops endurance, and fortifies the tendons, that I couldn't do it. And I think having that be the first few years of my career probably fortified my body. Otherwise, I'm in touch with when things do hurt. And I think that's the biggest advice, is just know your body, and tomorrow's another day, next week is another day. It's better to step back and not push, because otherwise you might be out for a much longer period of time. And then the maintenance things that we talked about, within this interview, is just like doing repeaters, solicit those parts of the body that you're going to really ask to be there for you. So don't expect to have strong fingers and not break them if you're not going to train them a little bit throughout the week. Same with the hamstrings, right? Get a routine going so that your body isn't going from 0 to 100 the moment that you do, go outdoor climbing or get to the competition or whatever. Like you need to look at, what are you preparing for? I say all the time, don't study math if you're going to be tested in science.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. look at what you're going to be tested on, or look at what your goals and your ambitions are, and then break that down and try to, put in efforts along the way so that when you get to the boulder, to your sport climb, or to your competition, you're feeling ready.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to be trying that heel hook warm up that you described.
So
that is very, it's very cool.
It's really good. Good luck.
All right, well,
it's fun. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Robyn, and thanks
so
for all your advice and your thoughts.
Likewise, thank you for having me and for considering me for the show. Yeah, I appreciate it.